So I've had this Mark II Audi TT for a few months now, but there's a few things I wish I'd known before I picked it up. So today we're going to go through the common problems on the Mark II Audi TT. So common problem number one is water ingress, because water seems to find its way into the car in places you definitely don't want it. Like your boot, down by your battery, and sometimes even in the footwell. And there are a few reasons why water's getting into the car. So water getting into the boot, around the spoiler you have a seal, and the seal tends to breach, which allows water to get in. It runs down through the plastics all the way through and eventually ends up in your boot and right down the bottom in your battery tray. You've also got little drains in the spoiler which can get blocked up with dirt, leaves and just anything else. And in your filler cap there's a little drain hole right at the bottom which can become blocked as well. And the reason sometimes you can end up with water in your footwell is because the door drains underneath the door get blocked up, and even the windscreen can breach. So if you press on the windscreen on the inside and it moves up and down, the sealant's got around the windscreen, so you're gonna need to get it replaced. And when I picked this TT up, I had all of those issues, so we've done a video on how to fix it in the top right hand corner now. Common problem number two, the bonnet catch. This bonnet catch always snaps on the old TTs. I think it's just over excessive use, or obviously it's being pulled a bit too hard. It's a very easy replacement. It's only 2 bolts, clips onto the cable, and that is literally it. Just pop the plastics out and you can put the new one in. Mine did snap, I did replace it. Unfortunately, I didn't do a video on it, but it's simple enough. Seeing as we've popped the bonnet, we'll move on to common problem number 3. And that is this, the cam follower for the high pressure fuel pump. Now these 2-litre TFSI petrol engines don't really have many problems, but one thing you do need to look at if you were to get a TT is the cam follower and a high pressure fuel pump. That's because in this fuel pump here is a little tappet that rocks against the cam and creates pressure in the pump for the fuel. And over time this does wear down to the point of where it will go completely, and if it goes completely it'll ruin the cam, which in turn can take the engine with it and cause catastrophic engine failure. But the good news is to replace that cam follower yourself is very simple, it's quite cheap, and I've done a video on how to do it, so click on the top right hand corner if you want to know how to do that. But I think as a whole these engines are actually quite good. So common problem number 4. Locked your keys in the boot? Yes. Yeah, you're not getting them back out. Unless you've got a big hammer or a phone number to a really good locksmith, or a spare key. And that's because on the Mark II Audi TT, there is no push button on the boot to open it. And without your keys, the only other way to open the boot on this is in the driver's door card. There's a little push button right there, and that opens the boot. So if you drop your keys in the boot and don't grab them before you close the lid, as soon as that lid closes, the boot's locked. If the rest of the car's locked, you've got no chance. Common problem number 5. If your fuel gauge looks anything like mine, where it's just below 1/4 of a tank, the car can run a tad rough. And I think this is because when you get down to just below 1/4 of a tank, if the fuel tank's got any sediment in it off crap fuels over the past few years, they tend to get sucked up to the filter. They won't go through it because of the filter, but because of that it's very restrictive to the fueling system. So I think what it does is the engine runs a little bit lumpy, and then when you put a full tank back in it, it runs fine. I don't know if you class that as a common problem because it's not really a big issue, but it's just something to be aware of. Common problem number 6, the rear brake light. So what can happen is the ground in the rear brake light, I don't know whether it's through water ingress and corrosion or what, but the ground in the rear brake light can become defective over the lifespan of the car, which means you don't get a good ground, which means your lights either start to flicker, don't come on, or your indicators don't work. But it also causes the ground pin in the plug to get really hot and start to slowly melt the plug away. So this hot ground pin in the plug could also be down to a poor circuit design from factory, but who knows. Common problem number 7. So my car is actually a really good example of this, because this common problem is to do with the parcel shelf. So you can see the bracket is there, that has snapped on the top, and on that side it's completely missing and it's snapped off, which is quite common, but someone has tried to stick that back on with either super glue or tiger seal. They must have done a good job on that side. That side failed. But apparently this happens to most Mark II Audi TTs, so the inner parcel shelf, I think they're only screwed into the sides of where the trim is, and over time they just snap and they fall out through just being used in general. But I'd say that's probably more of an inconvenience than it is a problem. Common problem number 8. Over time, the rear speakers in the Audi TT can begin to develop a buzz, and that's usually because of the amp in the boot. because when water makes its way into the boot, it can find its way into there. And down there is where the amplifier lives. So behind this trim, you can see that little box there, the little silver one with the fins. Like most electronics, it doesn't like to get wet, so if it does get wet, it doesn't work the way it should, and it starts doing weird things. Luckily, I don't have that buzz and I don't have that problem, but I know it can be an expensive one if it happens. The only other two main issues I've had with my TT, which I don't think are common problems, but the problems I've had are the thermostat housing started to leak, so I was losing a fair bit of coolant, but we fixed that and the video's in the top right hand corner now. And the other issue I had was coil packs. They were causing the car to run lumpy because they just weren't working properly and the spark plugs definitely need changing. So we've done a service on the TT and it ran perfect after that, in the top right hand corner if you want to know how. And that is literally it in terms of common problems with the Audi TT, because although there are 8 that I've outlined, they're not really big issues and they're issues you can fix pretty easily. So overall, if you're watching this video because you're thinking on buying an Audi TT, or you may have these issues yourself, I would 100% recommend it, because for what I paid for this, it was the cheapest in the UK when I bought it. Video in the top right hand corner. I've enjoyed this car every second I've drove it, give or take the problems I've had, and they're not that big issues, easily fixable, and as a daily, it's more than usable. You definitely can't get people in the back though, so if there's only 2 of you, that's fine. But I'd recommend the TT. The 2-litre TFSI is what I've got, so I know that engine, and it runs well, it drives well, and it's very modifiable if that's what you're into. If not, you can run it as it is stock, and it'll still give you just as much fun as if you were to change things on it. And because it's a turbo with an induction kit, I can get mine to do this, which brings a smile to my face every time. That's going to be it for this video, guys. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the content, and if you have, remember to like, comment, subscribe, hit that notifications bell so you get an update every time I post a video, and I'll see you in the next one.
Do you lie awake at night? Are you afraid to turn out the lights? Is there